Gagged me. I completely forgot that this reboot kind of started on well, not even kind of, it started on season 15. So I know I had said season 2. I mean, it's season 2 of the reboot, but we're on season 15 of New York. So I just kind of was gagged by that. I forgot about that, but I peeped it when I uploaded my last video. That being said, hello friends, we are here to review The Real Housewives of New York, season 15, episode 2. This episode to me was tea. It really was. It had a lot of tea in it. I like last episode to me was good, but it wasn't super exciting, like a Salt Lake City, like I had said. And if you guys watched Potomac, that wasn't super exciting either. But you know, this one I feel like definitely had the makings of a really, really, really good Housewives episode. And I think if they stay on this track, this could be a really, really, really good and entertaining season. So we start off, you know, Erin previously told us that her mother has breast cancer, and she, you know, she had a little bit of a short haircut in this, or shorter haircut in this episode, to kind of go along with her mom being chemo and losing her hair and her hair getting shorter. And at the same time, they're wig shopping. This just me. I mean, I just like a timeline. So I was just wondering, like, are they wig shopping in preparation for her maybe losing more hair in the future, or does she need the wig now? That's just kind of something I was thinking. So I wish we had talked about that a little bit more. And I say that to say that we just didn't get a ton of context. Obviously, we know that she's sick, unfortunately, and we know that comes with chemo. We know that chemo can come with hair loss, so we get that. But I think that when you're telling stories, you should tell it in a way that you are telling it to somebody that you don't assume has all the answers and you don't assume knows these things. So I wish in terms of storytelling and setting it up that we're at this wig shop that they would have given more detail about that, or maybe even talked to the mom a little bit more. But instead, it kind of felt like a backdrop for, you know, Uba and Erin to link up. So that's nitpicking, of course, but that's just, we're here to do that. Uba shows up. I do think it's interesting that Uba was the first one that Erin called, you know, when she found out that her mom was sick. Obviously, we know that Uba's mom passed, and she talked about that a lot last season, so I think it makes sense. But I do wonder what this means for their relationship. They do talk a lot and say, they did last season at least, that they're really close, and they talked about it in the first episode of this season. So I would like to see it. I will give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. I just don't feel like we're seeing much of Uba at all. Last season for me was like, okay, I'll give it a pass because it's first season, and I do think that she had the personality, not necessarily the story. But now it's like, where you at, sis? I also think it was part of the introducing of the tea of this episode was seeing Erin throw Jenna under the bus, her information, right? Because Uba explains that, I guess she's trying to give an explanation as to why she really hasn't been around. And oddly enough, her thing is, you know, she's not feeling the whole people mixing up each other's words. And I think that's fine, but it's also like, what are you doing here? It's Housewives. Like, girl, you're not going to do your job? I'm confused. But she says that, and Erin kind of breaks down the situation for her, which I appreciate because last episode it felt like it was kind of in passing. I'm down to get some more context this episode. So Erin explains that there's more to the story. Of course, there always is. And I guess they had gone to Anguilla or something like that. I just don't recall 100%. I wasn't listening to that part. Asking for context and not listening to full details. Hello, nice to meet you. That's me. She basically says they were on a trip. And Jenna has shared in confidence, and now Erin's telling the world, but Jenna has shared in confidence with the group that there have been times where, you know, money had run dry for her. And so Erin's like, you know, but I'm not trying to throw her business out there. And it's like, but you did. Welcome to Housewives. But anywho, she then conflates it in a weird way to me and says, you know, I think that BRYNN then used that to say that I was making a snarky remark when it came to the Hamptons to say that Jenna had money problems. I think that is like quite the reach, or even the reach on the Nike logo. Like it's quite a reach. But okay. To me, the important part that Erin, you know, threw Jenna's business out there. And now I'm wondering what first seemed like it was going to be like a throwaway type of thing. I'm wondering if this Jenna money thing is going to become such a huge topic, and it does come back up. She's also talking to, I think Uba asked her, like, you know, well, what's going on with Abe? And she's like, I don't really want to talk about it. And, you know, Uba's like, well, I'll be here when she wants to talk about it. Again, I don't get too invested into, like, the dating storylines and the marriage storylines because relationships can just be so weird, right? And then when you're in the heat of stuff, like you can say certain things that you don't mean. Sometimes people say they're getting a divorce and they never get it. Ashley Darby. Sometimes people say they're dating somebody that they're not really dating. Marlo Hampton. And so I don't really get too much into it, but okay. It just doesn't perk my ears up. But she does give us a roundabout statement in the confessional to say, he had made some decisions that she didn't know anything about, and she specifically used the word betrayed. So I'm listening to it to kind of interpret what it means, but I'm not really trying that hard. We then get Sai and Jenna, which is obviously an interesting link up because in the first episode, Jenna let Sai know, hey, I heard you've been going around town saying you hate me. And so they're sitting there and they're talking. I did think that it was fun in terms of story, right? We want to get to know these people. Sai talks a little bit about how her daughters are going to be going to high school. One of her daughters wants to go to LaGuardia, I believe it was, and audition, be a ballet. Like high school in New York is different. So I think that's fun, right? Like you're telling the audience a lot of people don't live in New York. They don't have kids. They go to school in New York. They don't know anything about that. They haven't gone to school in New York. So that's fun. Like tell that story, and then we move on to the tea. And, Sai's obviously on her same thing where she's like, this season I don't want to be angry. I really didn't care for what I saw of myself last season. She's not saying that explicitly, but we know what she's trying to say. It's hard for Sai to get those things out, I imagine. So she's just like, basically saying she didn't like the presentation that she gave last season and she doesn't want to be angry. And so she doesn't like the way that she responded at BRYNN's event because it was obviously out of anger. Whereas, like I said last episode, I just didn't think it was that big of a deal, but that's her own personal journey. And this is something that I was thinking about, and I'm glad that Jenna said it because Jenna's like, well, more people than BRYNN were telling me that you talked about me, so I don't think it's worth it to end your friendship with her over that. Like, it wasn't just a BRYNN thing. And I think that's fair. And another two-pronged thing is like, this is the second time now where Jenna has said, girl, multiple people told me that you were talking about me. And Sai, from what we see on the camera, doesn't even acknowledge it. So I wish that Jenna would kind of dive into that more. But if she doesn't care, then I guess we don't care either. But Sai basically, in not acknowledging that point, she basically not fully acknowledging. She says that that's not her whole thing with BRYNN, though. That's just kind of something that kind of got it going. But she says there's been other things, which I can imagine is also true. But I would love if she would acknowledge that she's been going around town talking about she hates Jenna. But I guess whatever. I do like Jenna's position of basically saying, like, you're guarded. Like, she pretty much clocked the whole thing out of Sai, and not in a nasty, negative way, but she's just saying, I understand. I think that's why she's not really getting too much into you told everybody you hate me, because I think that Sai talks out of insecurity and anger and fear because she's guarded. Like, people do that. Like, they throw jabs at other people because they don't feel good themselves, right? Or because there's something else internally going on. Like, they don't really have the self-awareness. And I believe that to be true in terms of Sai. I don't think that she's a bad person. I think that guarded is a great word. So I'm glad that Jenna was able to get that out. But she also says, you're guarded and so is BRYNN. So that's probably where the disconnect is coming. Sai feels like, well, she's like, well, I feel like I'm being vulnerable. And I would have to agree she is. But it's like, you're being vulnerable now. And yes, I can highlight you're being vulnerable now, and you were trying to be vulnerable at the reunion and reach out to BRYNN, but BRYNN is not really feeling it. And she said even at this point, she's reached out to BRYNN to be vulnerable. BRYNN left her on red. So it's like, it's nothing she can really do now. And I'll have to agree with that. Like, I feel like you made your effort, you put your best foot forward, and it is what it is. And Sai does bring up an interesting point, which again, I'm glad that she does bring this up because we see a similar parallel when it comes to like Candace and Ashley and Potomac, where I feel like, and a lot of people feel like Ashley does certain things that Candace does, but Candace is always the one that gets the hate for it. Here, I can agree that both Sai and BRYNN do some unfavorable things, and I do think that Sai gets a lot of the backlash, whereas people don't really get on BRYNN as much. However, I think that there's a difference. I wouldn't say that they do the same things. I think that a lot of the stuff about Sai is that she's very negative. Well, she comes off very negative, and her attitude is very off-putting, whereas you can't really say that about BRYNN. I think BRYNN is messy, and I think that she can be a little immature, and she definitely stirs the pot, and she definitely mischaracterizes information. But I wouldn't would not say that she comes off negative, and I don't think that there's anything about her personality that I can say I don't like. So I can understand people criticizing Sai's approach and personality last season and the way that she would blow up and argue and yell at people and not really getting into BRYNN being messy. But now this season, if we continue on where we are and Sai is being chill and being herself, yes, she's still going to be assertive because that's who she is, but if she has some more discernment and be a little bit more calm and being a little bit more reasonable, and then we still see BRYNN being same old BRYNN, it's going to be a lot easier for people to be like, okay, Sai, and then we focus on BRYNN. I think that's just kind of the way it goes. But I think it's a valid point that she brought it up. I think it was valid. It also brings up this threat from BRYNN. I think we talked about this a very little bit at the reunion last season. I don't know if it was a specific threat, but it was brought up that BRYNN will like threaten people because Sai's saying, you know, she does the same thing off that I do, but off camera. She doesn't do it on camera. And so she'll threaten people and be aggressive and all these other types of things. And they read this specific threat about, what was it, carbon monoxide or something like that. It's a very weird threat to receive. I don't know how I would even... you shouldn't take any threats as idle threats, but I don't even know how I would have responded to it because it was just very weird. But anybody that speaks that way, I would definitely look at them a certain type of way. And Jenna seemed to kind of like be passive about it, so I don't really know where she stands on it. It kind of felt like she didn't want to get into it, which is interesting. I like seeing the family scene of Raquel at her place. I was asking for more of this last episode because I'm like, I don't really know what to say about her first presentation. But the dynamic was really fun. I could have watched that for a really long time. There's not much more I can say about it, but I enjoyed it. I thought that the scene with BRYNN and Erin was very telling. I thought it was funny in Classic Housewives that BRYNN had decided to give Erin tap water as opposed to, cracking open a nice bottle of water for her. I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was even more hilarious watching Erin travel up the stairs to BRYNN's apartment. Very New York. So I thought that was fun. I thought that was good for TV. I did not like BRYNN's demeanor when Erin came in. I didn't care for that because she's coming to your house and you don't even really greet her at the door. She just walks in, you're sitting all the way on the couch, you're like, sup, and you're like playing on your phone, not looking at her. Didn't enjoy that. I also thought it was weird to say like, oh, she noticed that she cut her hair. She's like, oh, this is your you're going through shit thing, right? Like, I don't know if you heard the joke, but people would say like, when you're going through stuff, you cut your hair or change your hair, and it's like, her mom has cancer, weirdo. Like, girl, what? So I didn't care for that either. It was interesting to hear, because obviously with her approach, I'm like, what is she so upset about? Like, I get her feeling some type of way, but to me it felt like a fragility type of thing, as opposed to like they actually did something to her. I said that last episode. So I'm like, what is she really upset about? And to her credit, it is interesting to hear that she was more so upset because it felt like Sai had jumped in and it felt like a gang up between Sai and Erin. And she's like, when Sai does this, you never really check her on it. So I felt like there's some validity in that, and I can understand that being her issue. So I'm open to listening now. But it was ironic, obviously, to hear BRYNN. Like, now you get these parallels between the scene with Sai and the scene with BRYNN and them talking about each other and each other's behavior. They're both toxic. So it's obviously interesting to hear her say it and then kind of put it on Erin as well. And Erin clocks her teeth. Interestingly enough, Erin brings up the texting. She's like, well, it's not like I'm sending out, she said something to the effect of, it's not like I'm sending out texts about carbon monoxide. Like, you remember that? And you see BRYNN kind of make this face like, oh, bitch, we're going there. So you can tell kind of by how like Sai and Jenna handled it, and then now how Erin and BRYNN are handling it. This is something that they weren't really expecting to discuss on camera. But that was like a I see you, don't play with me type of thing. I feel like Erin was trying to put out, and it felt like BRYNN wasn't trying to have that conversation. And it's interesting to me that it came up from Erin because she wasn't even in that conversation with Sai and Jenna. And ironically, the text is being brought up by different parties in the same episode. So I'm wondering, like, is this a plan to take down of BRYNN? Is this something that y'all chit chat about behind the scenes? Like, what's going on here? Because this is way too much irony for me, baby. But even in that, they get past the mess and the arguing, and Erin does apologize again for the Jeff Lewis thing, basically just letting it go on too long. They do play the clip again. Erin didn't say anything bad about BRYNN, but I guess she was in a room with somebody saying something negative about BRYNN. BRYNN did get emotional about it, so obviously it affected her, and she said, it's been 8 months. So fine. For me, I feel like Erin was a bit too apologetic, in my opinion, but fine. BRYNN did also apologize in response about the whole Jenna thing. And I appreciate her honesty and basically saying that this was a get back, like being honest about that. And I like the context that she gave where she's like, it wasn't helpful for her. And it's very telling that she said it because I'm like, are you telling us this because you think it's going to be helpful to your cause? Because it's not. But she basically says, to be clear, I didn't go to Jenna about you at all. Basically, I went to Jenna and said that we linked up, and Jenna was asking me, had I forgiven you? And I said, yes. She was very, very explicit about the fact that Jenna was like, really? This soon? Like, why would you forgive her that soon? Like, kept repeating it, kept wanting to make it a point, obviously, like, drop that bug in Erin's ear. BRYNN is very good at that. So I'm like, okay, good TV. So, in that, because of the way that Jenna responded, BRYNN is like, my ego was bruised. So I did bring up to her the fact that, like, it is what it is. And she's like, I just feel like Erin says dumb stuff about people's money all the time. By the way, this is what Erin said about your money. Trying to be messy. And I think that Erin, just like myself, was more so caught up in like, did you think that was going to be helpful? Because it's not helpful. So then, of course, BRYNN reiterates like, well, I'm more taken aback by the fact that Jenna was so flabbergasted that I would forgive you so easily. Obviously trying to like point the finger at Jenna for talking shit behind people's backs and making it a thing. And, Erin does kind of pick up on that, but I don't know that that's her primary issue. But I do wonder if it's going to come back up. Because I did say last episode, I'm starting to see some things with Jenna where, like, you'll hear, like, Jenna said this, but you don't get any of that on camera. And so I'm starting to see a trend. And then, of course, BRYNN is still on this thing of, like, because we don't really go too much into the Jenna thing, she's like, well, I just want you to acknowledge that you talk about people's money a lot and you probably shouldn't. And Erin's like, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. Because, I mean, from the cameras, like the show, I don't really see that with Erin. I can see how it would create some irony, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I don't know that the evidence stacks up for that, for me. I thought it was fun to see Jenna rock climbing with everybody but her girlfriend, just all these random people that she's bringing, not including her son. Her son's obviously not random, but we're seeing random people, which I guess I'm fine with, but we're not getting any context as to why they're here and why they matter. Her son is an obvious one, so it was cute to see her rock climbing with her son. And, he's going to be leaving the nest within a year, and that's something that he enjoys, so that's fun. And it was a fun scene to see her rock climb, and she's scared of heights and all this good stuff, whatever. I will say, I was watching it live, so I couldn't rewind, and it wasn't important for me to go back and look today. But the car scene was just very convenient, and I'm wondering how the hell that even came up. Like, we're rock climbing, and then it's like, oh, my brand new car is getting dropped off, upstairs. And obviously they showed the cost of the car. They always do that on Housewives, so I won't attribute that to Jenna. But it's like, are you showing us that you bought this expensive car because these weird things are coming out about your money? Like, you're trying to prove a point? And Jenna, from the little we know about her, does seem somebody that is very ego-driven and very appearance-driven. And so I can see her doing something like that. Like, oh, let me prove a point. And I'm like, is this her? Then I'm taking it a little step further. Is this her kind of proving a point and flexing, like, oh, y'all saying I have money issues, but we're good over here? Or is this her kind of trying to, like, do a keeping up with the Joneses type of thing? I'm more so leaning towards a flex, because I don't imagine that Jenna has money issues. What type of, like, receipts do I have? Zero, but I just don't see it. But you never know. But it also could be that she's doing a keeping up with the Joneses and, flexing for the TV. She's either flexing on us to show us, hey, I got the bread, or she's flexing for us to show us I actually don't have the bread, but I'm going to act like I do. Clock that T. But she did do a nod. And look, if it's the case that she does have the money and this is just a flex, kudos to her. Do your big one, girl, because she does even make the joke of, like, it's a hybrid, so I can afford to fill the tank. Which, good read, you got that in there. But if you are having money issues, finally, and I like, literally have to tip my hat off to Erin. Like, she can be a lot of things, but she's very transparent. And finally, we're getting this scene. We're getting back-to-back scenes. Like, we got a scene last episode of a one-on-one with her and her husband, which is weird. And it didn't have to drag out. So hat off to production as well. Now we're getting another one-on-one. And they're explicitly saying what the issue was. It took me a while to buy it, but I buy it now. And essentially she was saying, I think it's because it just came out so quickly. And I'm like, because it's coming out quickly, is this a lie or a cover up? But I do believe that is for sure, for real, for real. And basically they had, accrued some Bitcoin, which I still don't ever understand. Needs to go get me some. And I guess they had accrued a lot and it was expected to go up a lot. So Erin was like, just like the rest of us Americans, baby, waiting for the next check. She's like, I'm just excited to see it hit my account. Like, I just wanted to see it because I had plans to like pay off some debts in our mortgage with that. So she went to check the account and not only was it missing, it had been missing for years because Abe had taken it out years ago at a lesser amount. So she has an issue with that, which I can understand. That is huge. And I would say that that is a betrayal. And this ain't about me, but baby, I just cannot see myself commingling my funds with any type of partner. And I also was a divorce attorney. So I'm not living for that. But that one hit home. But then she goes even further to say, this isn't the first instance of having to distrust him when it comes to money because there was some business that she had started a while back and she talked about it last season. I completely missed it. Thank you for the flashback. But I guess, it didn't work for her and she said they had some debts and she was under the understanding that Abe had paid them off and he had not. So I guess they're still in debt from that as well. So now all the things are coming together for me. I'm like, her mom's sick. I wonder if she's covering some of those costs. They got 3 damn kids. They just did a temporary move. Like, is this all a financial burden on them along with this mortgage and the fact that they lost this Bitcoin money? So I can completely understand that. And then we get even more context, which I just thought was just like, oh my God, like TV gold. Like, just to learn this type of a story, it's not a fortunate thing, obviously, but just to know where these people come from. We're obviously at a season 15 of Real Housewives of New York. We just met you people. You're part of a reboot. So a lot of people are not even trying to give y'all a chance. So, and it kind of felt like last season, they just kind of dropped them on us and we learned about them, but just not enough. We're not invested. So to be able to know things like this is very intimate, but that's why we're here. We're watching reality TV and it makes us be able to know you and get invested in your story. And we learned that, when she and Abe met, she was getting flued out. And she's like, let me be clear, I wasn't doing anything to get flued out. Guys were just flying me out. Abe acknowledges it, and he's like, when I met you, I had to step up to the plate and prove that I could be better than those guys financially. So, it's been a fight for the last 13 years that they've been together for him to keep up. And I think it's just clear that he feels like he hasn't kept up financially for her approval. And I don't know that we know how Erin feels about it. So I'm interested to know if she feels like, hey, I love you, it doesn't matter how much money you have, or like, damn, I wish I would have stayed in the flew out status of things. So I don't know, but that's interesting to learn. I never would have looked at Erin and thought like, oh my God, Erin used to be getting flued out when she settled for Abe. Like, I never would have thought that. And we don't know that that's the situation either, but now that's a story that's like kind of developing and we get to learn that. And also I'm thinking like, Erin seemingly came from money, right? Something we kind of talked about last season. So I think that Erin is not used to being out without a certain type of lifestyle. So I definitely can understand what Abe is saying. Like, this story makes sense to me. And it's interesting. We then get a scene with Uba and Sai. As soon as Uba popped up, I was just like, man. Like, she just hasn't been giving things to me. I don't mean to be negative, but I'm just like, what's happening? You know what I'm saying? But she pops up with Sai. She talks a bit about her boyfriend. I just said I'm not really into the whole like marriage and like dating things. When it comes to like Erin and Abe, like, this is how we met. This is where the insecurities are in our relationship. This is why. That's interesting. Fine, that's context. But like when it comes to like, I'm dating this guy and we might be getting married, or like infidelity, or like all that other BS. Essentially, which is interesting, I'll give it to her. She says that this guy had a job offer that he turned down in a different state so he could stay with her. So it does highlight the seriousness of their relationship, or perceived seriousness, or whatever plans they may have. I think that that's cool and that's interesting. And they talked a bit about her having kids. So I'm like, okay. But I would like something more interesting for Uba's story. Because if she had met this guy last season, this is the second season of her being on this show, what would we be talking about? Like, what would be happening? Interestingly enough, though, while she's with Sai, they also have a conversation about BRYNN being disloyal. So now I'm like, Okay, so I do wonder, like, is this season like a we're done with Bryn's BS, let's call it out type of thing? I'm just wondering that. And I also want to note that I know I'm on Uba's ass, but that's just how I feel. She looked like, Mercedes from P Valley, and her mom, that's the preacher. She like ran for mayor of Chuckalisa or something like that. She looks exactly like that in that confessional. So they're going to the Hamptons. Uba and Sai have realized that they are going to drive together. There's some talk about why Uba maybe doesn't want to be with the group. I'm not interested. I don't care. And the others are going to take a chopper. So now we get to, they're getting on the chopper to go to the Hamptons. And it's Jessel, Rebecca, and Brynn. And they realize they're waiting on Jenna, but they call Jenna, and Jenna's going by herself or something like that. And then she says something about Rebecca. None of this is interesting to me, so I really didn't get too much into it. But I just, those three, I love me some Jessel, but like I wouldn't have wanted to be on the chopper with them either. But while they're on the chopper, kudos to Brynn, she jumps right in and kind of feels like they break the fourth wall a little bit. She's like, you're coming on the show. It's going to be announced. Some stuff came out about Scientology. So, if we're asked, what do you want us to say? And she's like, no comment. And I get this is supposed to be a big thing. I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about Scientology. But I know that it is like an inflammatory topic, obviously, and it has been for a long time, especially as it pertains to celebrities. I would have to look into it more. But right now, I don't really care too much about it. But essentially, that's what a lot of the ladies were saying, whereas Brynn was more so like, well, I think it's weird that she doesn't want to talk about Scientology. And the answer she's giving me is like politician, and she's not being direct. But I just don't think it matters. I was more so inclined to agree with Jenna when she was like, there are extremes to all religions, but you can't apply that to every single person, because that's definitely true. But I would have to look into Scientology to see if there's something more like crazy and alarming there. But yeah, as I was saying, I think it was a strange way to leave off the episode, but that's how it left off. I'm just interested to see where the rest of it goes. But I think this episode had a lot of tea. I think there was some like filler stuff that really just didn't matter that much, but I would give it to the underworkings of like the Abe and the Erin story and the Brynn story, and like seeing where Sai lies, like, and Jenna being messy, like that type of stuff that's kind of working underneath the surface. I'm appreciating, and I'm hoping that it'll crescendo throughout the season, and we'll keep it running. So I'll see what happens in the next one.